Hello and welcome back to Starter Set. I'm one of your hosts, Mark, and I am joined tonight by Ian and Ralph again as we
Hello.
continue our conversation about Star Wars. Guys, how you doing tonight?
I am doing great. I'm working a lot, and I'm happy to be doing it. It's my favorite thing to be behind the mic and making funny voices and stuff. So, and it's after a little bit of a dry spell, things are picking up, and I'm really happy about it. So,
Well, that's awesome. Well, it was kind of
Yeah.
like a dry spell last week, wasn't it? It's like just like the last 7 days it turned around.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, hey,
I
we'll
mean,
take it.
it happens like that. So,
Well, and
yeah.
working on I'm in the know,
Mhm.
working on a cool project too that is, pretty would be pretty cool, I think, once it goes out for dad to be able to attach his name to.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big one. But we can't
Yeah.
can't say anything.
Yeah, I mean, I could say a little, but
No,
not
not even a
not.
little.
I can't. Okay, all right.
Well,
It's
Ian, how are you
fun.
doing, man?
I am doing decent. I'm doing real decent.
Okay.
Not too
Oh,
high,
totally
not too
mid.
low, very mid, right?
Yeah.
Very, very, very busy week at work, end of the quarter. So trying to check a bunch of stuff off the list. Got to get those bonuses. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of work being exhausting, from like a nerd perspective, man, I'm having a great time playing lots of games. I got a box of Pokemon cards headed my way, gonna get it on Thursday, gonna
Ooh,
crack those
nice.
suckers. Lorcana's been going well. I just crafted a new cool deck, which is pretty neat, and been building some Star Wars Unlimited decks based on some singles I've been getting in. I will say, in general card game news, and I don't want to take up too much time. Another flub by Ravensburger with Lorcana,
Oh no.
which is that they announced their big sort of tournament series, right? Like basically regional tournaments, kind of like how Pokemon does it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have like 6 in the U.S. Or 5 or 6 announced. I think 5 announced through like the fall.
Mhm.
And the first one was going to be in Atlanta, and so my girlfriend Lindsay and I were like, "Let's go." We chatted with Gibby. We're like, "Gibby, maybe you can go. Let's see if we can meet in Atlanta and play some hardcore, sweaty Lorcana in a big tournament, which has all these cool special artwork versions of cards with like really beautiful, like collectible, stuff. Even you get some just for playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, we're going to open up registration on Sunday at noon. And we logged in at noon from League, like where we're like, I set up League early so that I can get on at noon, and we're both sitting there with our laptops. We log in at noon. At 12:01 the site crashes. At 12:02 it uncrashes, and we put the tickets in our cart and begin filling out the registration paperwork. And at 12:03 we're kicked out of the registration page because all the tickets have been purchased and we're now on a wait list.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That was quick.
Yeah. So on one hand, hey, wonderful. Apparently demand is really big. On the
Yeah.
other hand, I heard the rumor over the last couple of days that they only allotted 512 tickets for this Atlanta event. And obviously the site crashing shows that they clearly do not know what goes on in these big trading card game tournaments, because they outsourced it. To be clear, Ravensburger did not do the tournament organizing. They
Yeah, it wasn't
outsourced,
Joe
which is
Ravensburger sitting there doing it, right? Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
they outsourced it to people that should know better,
Yeah.
frankly. And I don't know if this is a big organizer or what, but like this is like, Pokemon is working hard to overcome these issues and has been making big strides, from what I hear, overcoming these issues in the last year, right? Of like tickets selling out really quickly. And if you're not on in the first hour, this wasn't if you're not on in the first hour. This is
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I mean, and the site crashed. So it was literally random. I would not be surprised if there were people like scalping these things soon in the next week or two. It's going to be really bad, and it's left a really bad taste in our mouth, as well as a couple other people that were hoping to play competitively. Gibby ended up not doing it, but I was telling him about it. He's like, that is truly insane. And I'm like, how? Like, I hate to imagine that if that is not something that can't get immediately rectified, because like, what is that going to say to the other card games and players who have other options for card games if they want to take this game seriously and they can't even get a ticket to one of the few big events, in the first couple wave of big events? And I'm sitting here, I'm like, I can see myself traveling to play this game. I mean, it's an excuse to go away for the weekend with my girlfriend and play card games. Like, what more could I want, right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
But it's like, holy crap. No tickets already? It's like a Taylor Swift concert.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, it is good news that people are frothing at the mouth to play this game, and they want to get into the competitive scene. But you're right, in a market right now when there are so many games that are competing for people's money, eventually it just says, hey, I can't get singles. Hey, I can't get reasonably priced decks. Hey, I can't even get product. Now I can't get into tournaments. Eventually people are going to pivot and just say, what other game can I compete in? Yeah. Who else wants my money? Yeah.
Well, exactly. It's tough too, because you look at the fact that it's disappointing, and I'm sure that this was not how they planned it to go, obviously. But it's disappointing though that this is not a new issue, right? Like Pokemon and One Piece and these other games, these other big games, probably Yu-Gi-Oh, though I wouldn't know. I'm not a low life, right?
No.
Jokes,
sorry,
people.
Sorry, Yu-Gi-Oh players. Sorry.
I kid a little.
I kid because I love.
Right. But no, like, it's one of those things where you look at these games and like they have all dealt with these issues. So if you're a new game coming onto the scene, and hey, word of warning for FFG, because they've never had a game this big, and I think this big, this fast, probably not, right? But I'm sure they're going to be more organized than probably Ravensburger. But the point is, like, if you're a new card game coming into the scene, you are both in a good place because this is a revival of tabletop in-person gaming going on right now, post-pandemic, right? People are like, starting to move away from the digital card games and more back towards physical card games because they crave that human interaction. Okay, that's a great thing for you. But if you can't learn from your predecessors, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, certainly, I mean, it's a card game renaissance right now. Let's hope that they can get it figured out, because people want to play, they want to compete, they want to get into it, whether that's a ton of additional events, just a restructuring on how they're doing things from like, you do invite only to these really big events, and then you do tons of, depending more on local game shops to run good competitive, smaller scale tournaments, earn points and work your way up. Sounds like they're going to have to do something a little bit more grassroots and really equip an army of local game shop owners to be able to not have people get really frustrated, right? Compete at the local level, work your way up.
Well, and I think that they would do well to do that and to invest more promotional materials, more giveaways, and those sort of things for people like myself who are fostering a community in my local store. Like, I say this as somebody who runs the league at my local store, and I'm not employed by the store, right? I do it because I like it. And being able to grow this community, which, by the way, my Lorcana squad is twice the size of the Pokemon squad on a regular basis, right? I don't know about Magic because I'm never there on a Friday.
Sure.
But like I do know that, like, as far as our local group, it's families, husbands and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends. Like, it is the most diverse and family friendly group in my city. But honestly, even in other groups, it's still a game where I see significantly more women than I've ever seen in any other collectible trading card game, including Pokemon. And so I And so I think that that's an opportunity I'd hate to see them squander. And the way you do that is more grassroots, more resources going towards building communities, more things to give away, more things to win or earn, right? And I think right now Pokemon is crushing that. I know Magic does a lot of those sorts of things as well. So it's like they would do well to sort of pick up faster. And switching the conversation to Star Wars Unlimited, I know FFG is keeping tabs on things and watching those things because of the way that they rolled out the game and the way that they, based on that announcement, had reserved some product, right? So I'm really optimistic that if they made that sort of strategic, thoughtful decision based on seeing how Lorcana went, that they are not going to fall prey to some of these other mistakes that we're seeing a more inexperienced, game publisher make. So it's interesting. This started off with you asking how my week went, but we ended up here. How did it end up like this?
Well, DBN's got stuff to say. That
always.
Ian's got stuff to say. But I do want to get us onto the question of the day.
That's why you got to get that AI bot program quickly. Mark.
the Ian bot.
You'll program it with brevity.
I do want to jump into our question at the beginning because, there's certainly time for banter and things, maybe even in the post show today. But let's talk really quick. I wanted to ask this question. There's been a lot of conversation out there about the bad artwork in Star Wars, which has been probably the most keen point, like the most critical people have been of Star Wars Unlimited has been the artwork of specific cards. But there is some good artwork in the game as well. And so what I'd love to know is, out of all of the cards that you've seen or you've experienced, if you've looked through sort of the database of them, what one do you like the most? What's your favorite piece of artwork? And Ralph, I'll hand it over to you to answer that.
Well, and luckily you sent out that question so I could take a look. And, I think that there's a few things you could divide these up. First of all, just about any ship that came out in a foil looks really good. I think I've mentioned that before, but any time, that was the big thing that made me go, whoa, look at that. It was when we hit a foil of a ship. I like those even better than like the hyperspace ones, because then so what do we lack in there? We get a little extra less border, right? Okay.
Oh, you need a hyper foil.
But
we have a hyperspace foil A-wing, which looks sick.
It really does. But artwork itself, for space, I really liked the ones that they chose for the playmats. The Alliance X-Wing and the TIE Advanced look really good. Now, the TIE Advanced looks better on the card, as we mentioned, than it does to us, at least Ian and I, on the playmat, because the blur on it. Those look really good. But for space, I got to tell you that I really liked Relentless. The Relentless, the way it's in the clouds and the mists are going, it looks very painterly. So for space, that was the one that really popped out to me when I was going through the artwork. I remember in the old days when I used to do a little bit of computer animation, and the software that I used was being used by the original show Babylon 5. And one of the things that they said whenever they put a ship into space was that they would almost always have to have some sort of nebula or planet or something behind it, so it popped off of that. So it wasn't just a computer generated ship on a black background with a couple star things. Well, the Relentless really does that. I mean, it has atmosphere around it, and it looks, you're seeing it here, it looks just really, really good. For heroes, for me, down absolutely no other one. Grand Admiral Thrawn. I think he looks so real. I love the pose. It's so in character. The background really works. I think when I first saw this, I know that unfortunately I left my deck of this at Ian's when last time we played.
It's okay. I'm upgrading it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. But just the artwork alone made me, I want to play this. And then of course he's got a cool effect too that I think is going to take a little bit of puzzling to figure out the best one. But I really like that one. For units, I think Darth Vader. I mean, not just to pick the big, most expensive one, but look at all the stuff that's going on here in a small amount of space. We've got him in a pose where he is imposing, but also in command. You can see that he's issuing personal orders, just like Patton storming the beach, right? And so, and behind him, you've got, the troopers coming in, ready to do their dirty deeds. You've got, I mean, this is that artwork.
And the mist on the ground does it for me.
Coming in. I mean, that is by far
very
away.
Hoth.
But and I like Overwhelming Barrage. Is
Dang
really
it,
good.
Dad.
Oh,
that's my pick.
Okay. I like that one a lot. Here it is right there. But
I mean, it's just
my actual number one favorite card, and trust, Ian's dad to really go off the chart. I really like the experience token art. That is my favorite.
Hold on, I don't even know that I can pull that up.
It's here.
Can I get it?
It's really good.
Yeah. It is good.
It's really good.
I love this. It is, it's Yoda, my favorite character in this pose from Empire Strikes Back. Luke is training. It ties in. He's gaining experience, the token.
Yeah.
I'd put that one on my wall. I
actually
love
is really
that.
good.
Yeah.
I wish that card was. I wish it was artwork for a non-token.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too.
It'd be cool to have like a meditation card or a training card that added experience tokens to somebody for him. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me chime in here. We got Ralph gave us the leader, the space unit. He gave us all of the stuff. So let me quickly give you, I think, one of each of mine as well. For my space unit, it's probably one of my favorite cards in the game, one of my favorite effects in the game, and one of my favorite artworks in the game, and that is the Imperial Interceptor, the 4-cost red and villainous 3/2. That when you play it deals 3 damage to a space unit. I have a borderless hyperspace hollow of this card, and I freaking love it. And in my deck that this runs in, I have 2 other hyperspaces. I have a full set of hyperspace, one of them being foil. Absolutely love this card. I think it's just fan freaking tastic, and one of my favorite space units to play.
Good choice.
Now, if I had to shift and pick, because it would be Vader. Like it'd be Vader. My runner-up is Jabba, and a lot of people don't like the Jabba, but my runner-up is Jabba. But if I had to pick a unit, they did a really good job with Boba Fett. They did a really great job, but I'm gonna have to go in the end of the day with Fett's Fire Spray in hyperspace.
Nice.
I've just always had an affinity for Slave One. Now I know we're not allowed to call it that anymore or whatever. That's why it's called Fett's Fire Spray now, but just really like the card. The card's fun. It's incredibly powerful, super oppressive in game. And I just wait, that's another space unit that I picked. I picked double space unit. Okay, I'm going to go with Boba Fett. I've just taken too many things.
There you go.
Double space unit. Okay, I'll go with Boba Fett. And then if I have to pick a leader, artwork wise, that I really like, I honestly, I really love the base Luke.
Yeah, that's nice.
That came in the 2-player pack. I do not love the pre-release promo. I think the pre-release promo looks like
looks dorky
garbage. It looks so bad, and I don't like it at all.
Yeah, he looks like Luke the janitor there.
Yeah,
yes. Luke on his over his
name
pocket.
tag. Yeah.
Yep. And the hyperspace variant of it that you can get from like cons, from an FFG booth at cons, looks mightily awesome. And I have some friends who frequent a lot of cons who are trying to get me a copy of Luke and Vader in hyperspace. But I really like the look of the Luke. I think Luke looks really great in that. I think there's some other good ones. And of course, the best showcase is not Luke, because there isn't a Luke showcase. But it's still very good. This is without including showcase arts in my estimation here.
Hey,
how about you,
DVN? Jabba again?
We can go back down and pull up Jabba. He's kind of he's very stylized. He's very stylized.
It just dawned on me. To me, he looks like Oogie Boogie from
he does.
He looks like a character from Ghostbusters.
Slimer,
Slimer the
like
later
Slimer.
years.
A lot of people don't like this artwork. I do like it. I do like the artwork. So okay, Ian, how about you? What are your favorite artworks in the set?
Well, we can go back to the top and start with the leader.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And one leader, there's actually 2 leaders that jumped off the page at me. One only because of hyperspace, which is Leia. I think Leia is a mid-tier artwork normally, but a like S tier artwork in hyperspace with the
Mhm.
extra
She looks
lines.
great in hyperspace.
Yeah, and I have a hyperspace Leia, and it pops,
Mhm.
But I think without the hyperspace, I think it drops in my estimation. But the leader artwork that from all of them that jumped off the page to me in terms of really evoking the character is Emperor Palpatine. By far, this pose. It
That's nice.
just it is menacing, but it also is just the utmost dripping with authority.
Mhm.
Like this is the artwork of an emperor, and that's that power pose in the throne, like that does it for me big time.
Have you
And
looked at the showcase of him?
maybe it's been a minute.
That's the showcase.
I mean, the
And
showcase is
Yeah.
is
obviously fantastic.
absolutely stunning. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
showcases are trash. The showcase of Emperor Palpatine, I think, is the best piece of artwork in the entire game. But
Yeah, well, and I
That's a
think the
great
base
gaming
ones.
chair too.
I think the base, yeah, it's a good gaming chair, good back support, right?
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, I think that the base Emperor Palpatine is really good too, though. So
He is. Yeah,
I'm
it's
really
done well.
impressed with that.
You want this, don't you?
There's a
Yeah.
common theme here amongst the best artwork for me, which is Imperial stuff. So I think Gideon Hask, while you're there, is just I don't even really know this character because I don't think I played the video game it was in, but
Mhm.
really beautiful card, right? All the blaster fire going by. Wish it was on
Yep.
a character I knew.
It is done. It is done well. Yep.
It's done really well. But Dad stole Overwhelming Barrage, which is
Sorry.
for sure the best action artwork in my opinion. And in hyperspace, so this just is the might of the Empire
Mhm.
distilled into a card. You know what I mean? So just like the silhouetted sun or moon or whatever that is, right, with the shadow because of the the sun coming up behind it. Like obviously everything framed on center, the size of the Star Destroyer next to the Rebel frigates. You know what I mean? Like it's just fantastic. So I really like this card. Both it's powerful, but also obviously it feels like an overwhelming brush. It feels imperial,
Mhm.
Anyways, but what I'm getting at is I think that they did a incredible job taking something as generic as stormtroopers, which in media historically has been sort of joked and
Mhm.
stereotyped and whatever, and made them menacing and cool. And so I would like to direct your attention to what is otherwise not probably very and not a kind of card that people would ever say, hey, this card it will be really cool, which is the Cell Block Guard.
Mhm.
Mhm. It was a
Um,
very good card right now.
which
He was
is a
excellent.
strong card, sure, but like if you were going to be like, oh, dude, what card is the best artwork in Star Wars? The Cell Block Guard. You know those guys that just got shot by Han and Princess Leia as they were escaping down into the trash chute? Yeah, but the low camera shot, right, looking up to this menacing guard who's sort of staring off camera straight forward. You've got
Yeah.
sort of it off kilter to give you some
Yeah.
like movement in it. It's just really well done. So those are my picks. I think the Imperial cards could have come out really corny. And instead, they came out looking like some of the best ones, especially I think all of the AT-STs and AT-ATs look really good.
Bro, yes.
AT-AT Suppressor is my personal favorite of all of the, Chicken Walker family, you know. And that's a blue one.
That's a blue one.
Blue
I couldn't
8
remember if
drop.
it was blue or green.
Yeah, it's a blue 8
Yeah,
drop.
the AT-AT suppressor is pretty nasty looking.
And
I have
that
a
one-
hyperspace of this. It's
I do as
really nice.
well, and it's
Mhm.
because of the city around it. I think that's
Mhm.
on Lethal. It's supposed to be. But anyways, so really enjoy the Imperial artwork.
Nice. Yeah. Well, there you go, guys. Not all the artwork's bad. So if
No.
people were telling you they
It's
don't
not.
like the artwork, there's
It's just some of the artwork is bad.
Some of the artwork is really bad. Yeah. So with all of that being said, we had our first big tournament that came out. We had two actually. We had one in Poland and one in England. The one in England was like one of the first official ones, though. The one in Poland had a couple, I don't know, 150 players or so. Pretty good prize pool, but the one in England had a huge prize pool. I think that the winner took away 4 cases. That is 24 booster boxes of cards as the winner. That's a lot freaking
Yep.
a lot of money. I think it was like a $10,000 prize pool altogether that was divided up amongst the top 8 or top 16 or top 32. I can't remember. 200 and some players, almost 225 players. And I'll grab the link for it and toss it in the show notes if you really want to check it out. Top 8, all Boba Fett.
Boba
Now,
Fett.
this was, yeah, a lot of Boba Fett. 8 rounds of Swiss,
Yeah.
I believe. Might have been 6 or 7. But the only I think one person came out completely undefeated throughout the whole thing, Boba Green. And then so there was 6 Boba Greens and 2 Boba Yellows, which has kind of shot some stuff around the community, like, hey, maybe this game isn't as balanced as we think. So I'm going to kick it to Ralph.
Yep.
Ralph, you've played a lot of card games,
I
seen
have.
metas evolve. Do you think we should take from this, oh no, the game is not as balanced as we think it is? Or do you think there's a certain amount in which the game is still so young and so new, it's been out for a couple of weeks, that
Mhm.
maybe we just haven't found a good way to play around this very powerful, menacing deck?
I was hopeful that after seeing Lorcana come out with such a small, relatively small number of cards in its base set, in its core set, and really very quickly figuring out which 1 or 2 decks were dominant, I was hopeful that when we had a lot of cards to choose from with 6 different little dots on them that we could pull together to make these really cool cards, that we wouldn't see this. So my initial response when I saw this and I saw 8 decks that were the top 8 were all Boba Fett, I'm like, okay, this reminds me of some of the time that we had in Legend of the Five Rings, the LCG, when Fantasy Flight did that. Not the first version of L5R, that it got to the point where cards, cool cards, kept going to what you would essentially call, for all intents and purposes, the evil faction. They just kept getting the same kind of deal. And I look at this, and as I'm going through and I'm checking out the Boba card, which is cool, and I'm looking at Darth Vader, and I'm looking at some of the support cards, you know, villains are often cool. They do cool things. Thanos, Doctor Doom, you know, Darth Vader, they do cool things. They shoot lightning, you know, they have, you know, moves. They can do all these wacky things because they're not held to the same moral standards generally. And I think it's really neat to be able to make cards for the Empire and for the Sith. And maybe it's a bit more of a challenge to find, you know, creative, powerful cards for Yoda and Obi-Wan. When you think about Star Wars and you start thinking that, you know, what do the cool guys do? A lot of the things are like in their head. You know, they do this and they see the future, or they, you know, or they both sides have glowing sticks that they hit each other with. You know, both sides can go like this and force push. So
Well,
I'm
just to interject on your point,
Sure.
to sort of elaborate, I'll just throw in the context that I think every single villain leader feels very, very different.
Yep.
And yet 4 of the hero leaders in Cassian, Leia, Sabine, and Jin all feel like 4 different flavors of aggro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't, and especially Jen and Cassian feel very and actually I would argue Sabine. I have zero interest in Sabine because she's boring.
Yeah.
I think Leia of the 4 is the only one that I look at and I go, wow, Leia's interesting.
And Leia deck did fairly well in that turn.
Yeah, Leia's strong and Sabine is strong. I think Cassian and
Jin are terrible.
Jin are awful.
Yeah.
And but I'll just throw in, just as a +1 to what you're saying, Dad, is that like it seems like you're right. Like they took these Star Wars, you know, Rogue One and Rebels characters, right? And they were like, we kind of ran out of ways to feel like we need to make them unique. I thought the Cassian in particular was incredibly disappointing after watching Andor.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I want to see like a heist or like an infiltrator vibe, and instead, you know, it's just another semi-aggro.
Yeah, and so you know, I think we're seeing the control, or we're seeing the overpowering, you know, which is of course what the Sith does. And I guess honestly, if you are focusing this around A New Hope, which most of the cards seem to be in that. Well, that's kind of the position that, the rebels were in at that point. They were struggling. So thematically, I guess it works. But I was concerned about that. Now, here's the caveat. The guy who won the tournament wrote a very lengthy, very good, fair article. And so hopefully, Mark, you can, link to that as well.
I can, yep.
About his experiences. And even though he said and acknowledged he was playing Boba Fett because that was the best deck to play, it was the correct deck, if you will, and that the base that he chose, I guess what you call the green base, the energy
conversion lab.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He said by far and away that's the best base. That's the most powerful base, and I can see that. And he said that was his only complaint. He did run across, because there were so many people, a lot of different kinds of decks, and everybody seemed to be having fun. They were, seemed to be there to play what they wanted to play, which is the good side of like the games that we did, in the past, Versus and Legend of the Five Rings. I was a Mantis Clan player, and when they sucked, I was still a Mantis Clan player. Yeah. So if you want to play, cheer it and get out there and throw, do the Force guys and, whatever, you can do it. You may not win the tournament. So I don't know. It comes down to me is that ultimately, for the length of this game, I want to know who FFG is targeting this game to. Who is their target audience? We're seeing with Lorcana, it really seems to have a very diverse audience of people that want to play casual and put Daisy Duck and Mickey Mouse and, the Madrigal family and all this into play and just have fun doing that and maybe win a couple of games. And then we've got people that have like sucked this thing up and like, okay, I'm doing 4 Rapunzels and I don't care what they cost, 4 Sad Beasts, and I'm going to go and I'm going to wreck and I'm going to go to and call up Atlanta and in 3 minutes buy up all the cards, buy up all the tickets for this. So I think Star Wars may end up being this kind of thing to some degree. But are they going to get the female audience? Are they going to get the kids that didn't grow up on it and didn't sit in a theater like me when I was a teenager and go, I've never seen anything like this before, and then my rest of my life was so dull when I walked out of the theater because it was like, wow, I don't have a, I don't have a star.
Answer, probably not. But anyways.
Okay.
Ian, I want to field a separate part of this to you because you just came out of a before Into the Inklands meta where there was a couple very dominant decks in Lorcana. Yeah. So one of the other pieces that came out of this was not only were the top decks Boba Fett, but 20% of the tournament was Boba Fett.
Yeah.
With an over 60% win rate. Yeah. And so like you have to imagine a lot of those at a 20% play rate. There's a lot of like matchups where there is a Boba Fett who's losing. And then for it to still rock a 60% win rate is pretty ridiculous in games. Do you think that's because, once again, maybe people don't have the ideal cards for their decks? Maybe Boba, or do you think it's like that broken? I mean, coming out of the Lorcana meta where you did have a couple of decks that were like, it was almost obnoxious that every tournament was just kind of that deck because it was the best thing. It seems like that was the case, at least for this initial tournament.
Yes to all of those, but in different degrees, right? So on one hand, obviously Boba Fett is strong, right? I've seen enough gameplay to know that. I also think that in limited card pools, mid-range decks are particularly potent. So if you have a mid-range deck that comes together, that's actually the scariest type of deck in a meta like that, because a skilled player has the most, in my opinion, expression of that skill because of the varying paces of play. And typically because of the varying types of tools that will be included in a deck that is attempting to control an aggro deck while simultaneously, outpace a control deck. And it will have a mix of proactive and reactive tools. The mulliganing becomes significantly more important. The resourcing choices you make in the early game, especially in Star Wars Unlimited specifically, is particularly, more challenging as opposed to, aggro decks, which typically go for the most efficient play, and control decks, which typically go, for the most, resourceful play, right? In terms of like control decks typically do, and this isn't simplification, but typically operate off of a script, and that when you play a control deck, you know what you're likely going to be playing against, and you look for the options based on what you see. Oh, I see that they flipped a red base. Okay, I know the typical threats that a red base is going to employ. They have 2 defense. I'm going to go look for the thing that does 2 damage, right? And so like it's more not as simple as following a script, but control decks typically do that. The true adaptive players, the highest skill players that are forced to utilize and leverage their game knowledge, but also take these different options and put them together in ways that make sense based on the game plan in a mid-range deck, typically rise to the top. And so I think that there's a component that, compared to Lorcana, which in its very first set, the best deck was a control deck, as in the deck with the most, cards that are not bad. And I say that as like, when you were in base set, you played cards that sometimes were blank just because they had good stats. It's the Chillwind Yetis. Was that what they were called in Hearthstone?
Oh, right.
Yeah. The 4 resource 4/5, right?
Yeah. 4 resource 4/5. You played it because it was efficient and there wasn't a better card in that slot, right? That's what base sets do in games. You play cards like the Smuggler, the Duros Smuggler. I don't remember what it's actually called, but it's a 2/2 with Ward.
With Ward, yep. Yeah, right. With Barrier. Is it Barrier? Shield. It's Shield.
It's Shield. Sorry. You play that because there's not a better option to fill the slot. It's actually a great card. I'm not saying it's not a great card, and there will probably be a few more sets before it eventually gets phased out for things with more complicated effects. Right. But my point is, that's what a base set looks like. And so when the best deck in a early game meta is a control deck, inevitably there will be people that are also cutting into the play rate because they are playing aggro decks intended to go under that control, which sort of ends up in this polarized matchup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what else? Crafty Smuggler, thank you for pulling that up on screen. For our YouTube viewers, hey, if you're listening, check out our YouTube channel. Great segue there. Boom. All right. Got the plugs. So, and then I think that there's a separate thing. So on one hand, Boba Fett is that good. And mid-range decks thrive in a less complex meta, and they thrive in a meta with less efficient options, by both control decks and aggro decks, because, they are able to prey on inefficiency. And the thing that mid-range decks, for the record, for those, who don't have this background, like this theoretical background of these sorts of things and like these Hearthstone clone style combat systems, like mid-range's downside is typically consistency, because there are certain situations where you might draw the wrong tools. You might be in a control matchup and you draw all your reactive tools, right? Or you might be in a, aggro matchup, and draw all your proactive cards that you would typically want to play against control. And so what that means is it takes a higher skilled player to be able to make those decisions as you move and navigate through the game to mitigate those inconsistencies in exchange for the maximum flexibility of the archetype. So anyways, but then there's the other problem.
If I may,
go ahead.
Before you go into that, again, that article, the person who won the tournament, he has the specifics of what you're talking about based on how to run. He tells you how to run this Boba Fett deck based on, and even what do you mulligan for, based on what you see, what base comes down. So it's exactly in line with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean that's mid-range decks in a nutshell, right? Is like there's a lot of flexibility in them, and that you sort of tailor your approach as a player, as a deck builder, and then of course based on the matchup. But the other thing I'll say, and I think this is something that definitely hit Lorcana harder than other games. I suspect it will not hit Star Wars Unlimited as bad, because I think Star Wars Unlimited is pulling from a different pool of players. I think it's pulling more from slightly more sophisticated players or more experienced card gamers that are coming from games with a little bit more of a pedigree, right? Or pulling
or at least a more narrow field, right? Like at least it isn't as wide of a net, so it's not gathering as many inexperienced players as Lorcana did. Yeah.
But something I see in new games all the time, but I saw to a staggering and almost sort of there. Gibby witnessed a few of my rants where I talked about how frustrating this was. Lorcana, especially last meta, specifically the Rise of the Floodborn meta, ran into a massive groupthink issue, right?
Mhm.
Where because there were, tournaments where the best deck was obviously Ruby Amethyst Control, but because that had become like the premier S tier deck, the Charizard EX of Pokemon, right, the equivalent to the best deck in format. Unlike Pokemon, where when there's a best deck in format, the natural response is to find things that counter it, because you'll know that people are playing it and are preparing for it and are polished on that matchup. And so, anytime you see a best deck in format in most other games, but as I've been following the competitive Pokemon scene a little bit more closely this last year, right, like seeing that and knowing, hey, this is best deck in format, you see people teching for it, preparing for it, practicing against it, and building and potentially playing decks that they would otherwise not have played if they were not suspecting to see a decent percentage of the player base piloting a deck that they know is consistent and powerful. The problem in Lorcana, and what is seemingly a similar problem in this early stage of Unlimited, is that everybody gravitates toward what is the best deck. I must play that, and there's no other way around it. And so that's why there was a disgusting over 50% play rate at a big late in the format tournament for Lorcana in Europe, where over 50% of the meta share was one deck, the Ruby Amethyst Control deck. And I made a comment to Gibby. I said, if with this amount of play, right, where people are, instead of saying, how do I break the meta? How do I adapt? How do I tech my deck against it? How do I play a deck that is naturally well suited to it? Instead of doing that, people aren't putting in the work, and maybe the content creator scene is not putting in the work, or there's no one established enough yet to sort of lead this charge of, okay, if Boba Fett's busted, how do we beat it? Right? Because inevitably, anything with a leaderboard system, you'll start seeing people who are grinding the ladder go, the best way to grind ladder is not to play the thing that everyone's expecting. The best way to grind ladder is to play the thing that crushes the thing that everyone's expecting and that everybody's playing, right? But you didn't see that going on in Lorcana. I made the comment to Gibby, if we had a team of 4 or 5 players that rolled up to a competitive, high value Lorcana event where the best players in the game, basically said, I don't trust the ability of any other deck to win consistently, so I'm just going to play the best deck and be okay with a bunch of mirror matches. I said, if we rolled up with a tempo heavy aggro deck and 4 of us rolled up with it, 1 of us would win the event. Yeah, maybe not all of us, because we might hit 3 or 4 bad matchups of the couple people that weren't playing the meta deck. But if we hit a string of, if we played 8 rounds and hit a string of 5 of them being the meta deck, we would probably win all of those games. And then just have to, break even on the games that we didn't play the anticipated deck. That's why you see in Pokemon, that's why you see teams play, right? They're testing groups that all sort of play against the meta and try all the different things. They come to a consensus on what they think the best call is. And inevitably, they will learn from that. And you'll see teams where, hey, Azul, who's one of the best Pokemon players, has a team of 4 or 5 people. I don't exactly know. They all say, hey, here's the play. We're playing it. And when one of them tops the event, they all topped the event because they put the work in to understand the meta and how to exploit it. That wasn't done in Lorcana. And it seems like, and it's not even that unanticipated. This is one of the first few big events, right?
Right.
People clearly were like, Boba's the deck. And there was not a consensus best deck yet, right? But clearly everybody kind of went to the drawing board and said, Boba's the deck. Okay, here we go. But now, and the reason why I'm not totally concerned, yes, clearly it's the best deck in format if 8 people made the top 8, whatever. But clearly nobody was teching against it at that point.
Yeah, so now, if the next tournament, everything's Boba,
we have a problem.
Then we will realize
now
that
we're
there's
concerned.
now we're concerned because one of two things are true at that point. Either one, so many people are playing Boba that there's a disproportionate representation, which is just making it inevitable that Boba rises to the top, which is what happened to Lorcana, which is why I blamed the player base for not putting in the work and for being, strategically lazy. If instead we see a wide play rate, right? So something more akin to a Pokemon tournament where the best decks are seeing like 15 to 18% of the meta share, right? Mm-hmm. If you see something more like that and you see a top 4 with 3 of them being Boba Fett's, then maybe you have a balance concern.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to ask again with your since you're running Lorcana events and whatnot, you do have, the classic 3 types of players, and one of them wants to win at all costs, right?
Right.
Now, in Lorcana, it's going to be the Ruby Amethyst, you're going to come in right now in a Star Wars. If you go to a casual event, somebody's going to be running Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 or 3
my
people.
local store, there's people.
Sure.
But I also...
Does that discourage the casual and the new players coming in that maybe can't afford the 3 Vaders and are trying to put together what they can? I don't know, but maybe it's
so. I actually
question.
I've been thinking a lot about that. I actually think no.
Okay.
I think what it does is it discourages aspiring competitive players. I don't think it discourages casuals because they don't know why they lost a lot of times.
Okay.
Right? They go, "Oh, I lost. Oh, wow, that was really cool. Wow, you're really good at this game." I played a relatively new player at League this week, and she had a pretty good deck. I had a slightly better deck, in my opinion, but she had a legitimate deck. She was relatively new to the game, had bought a lot of product, and she wasn't bad. But clearly she was new because when I won, she was like, "Wow, you played that really, really well." She's like, "You had a great strategy," and I'm like, thanks. It's like a tier 2 meta deck. I don't really think I did anything that spectacular, but thank you. But I think that's how newer players view it, right?
Okay.
They're not worried about, they don't know what's met. I think it's only when somebody goes to make the leap from a casual to a competitive player that you potentially lose them if either the meta deck is too expensive, right? Or if they are someone like myself that associates as sort of a Spike first but a Johnny second, somebody that wants to play at a high level but refuses to just shill the top deck over and over and over again, right?
Right.
And I happen to think that is not strategic. I happen to think that, and this is supported by a lot of top players in multiple games, but if there is a number 1 top dog and you want to, it's one thing if you want to top an event or if you want to make the day 2 at a big Pokemon regional, maybe the choice is to play the best deck that is the most powerful, most consistent. But if you want to win, if you want to actually win it, you cannot be expecting to take the deck that everybody is teching for and at the top tables not get wrecked. So, I just think, and then I think that there's also, what kind of spikes do you attract? And so, Mark, I think you'd agree. Indozoa, right, from the Tesla days?
Yeah.
Indo would never be caught just playing, the thing that everyone says is good, right? And Indo was one of the most cerebral players we've played, with or against and talked to, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't necessarily think at present Lorcana is attracting as many of those types of players as it is attracting the sort of Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta slaves who are coming over to Lorcana because either they've been socially exiled from their previous game or because they are, or more likely, because they see Lorcana as untread ground for them to make their mark in.
Now,
right?
Are they,
they
come
go in
over
this
to
field
Star
and
Wars
dominate.
Unlimited?
Maybe I actually think so, and I actually saw some of those more, in my opinion. I don't want to say problematic's not true. That's not true. It's more like they're not as cerebral, but they still take the game ultra seriously, and they do that by just playing whatever everyone says is the best. And inevitably, because it's powerful and consistent, that's why people say it's the best. They win a lot of games, right? They may not win the tournament, but they win a lot of games. They feel like they're pretty good at the game. I believe that Star Wars Unlimited is a great place for them to be. More so maybe than Lorcana. And I did see a lot of those types of players just checking out Star Wars Unlimited.
Right.
I think that there's I think there's the kind of person that wants to be the best at the game, at any game.
Right.
And the kind of person who wants to be the best at any game is going to jump ship when there's new, ground to be tread, and they're hoping that they're going to be the, the defining player of that generation. Right. The Brian of Versus System, the Bardo of Old 5R, the, any number of Pokemon players, but currently the Tord and the Azul of Pokemon. They hope to be that in the new game, which does not have those established names, because to them, I think, and for many Spikes, it's about the prestige of being perceived as the best, as opposed to focusing on any one game and really trying to be the best at that game, which is where you get those types of players that know how to read a meta and adapt and counter it. Right. So anyways, a little bit of a rant here, but I'm
a little bit.
Well, Mark, you have reviewed.
I opened the can.
Mark, you opened the can. You did this.
Mark, you've reviewed every single card of this first set.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've looked at what cards are going together to form these Boba Fett decks.
Yep.
What do you think about that? And is the card pool there to be able to build a meta? A silver bullet against these Boba Fett decks?
So I think a couple of things. One, I think that there's some untapped stuff. I think that Boba Fett is going to be undisputed best deck in set 1.
Okay.
In the limited format, and the reason is there's a really exploitable turn in Boba Fett that you can't really come back from, and it's just on turn 1 you have 2 resources, doesn't matter what you do. On turn 2 you have 3 resources and you ramp with either super laser tech, with energy conversion lab, or you ramp with resupply. On turn 4 on turn 3 you now have 5 resources. You tap all 5, exhaust all 5, and you play Bosk or another 5 resource with ambush. It attacks in and removes something. Boba Fett can exhaust and ready a resource. You can then flip Boba Fett, and when you flip them, even if they're exhausted after using their ability, they come in readied. And so he comes in readied, he attacks, you've already used something, he's the most statted minion, he's out a turn early, and he readies 2 resources. Now you have 3 readied resources, and you're putting a third thing on the board. And a lot of times this is your Boba Fett card, which is a 3/5. So you're playing a 4/5, a 4/7, and a 3/5, all on turn 3 of the game. And then the next turn, while your opponent's trying to wipe that up, they play a readied Fett's Fire Spray 5/6, which is the most powerful space unit in the game, in the space lane. I think there's an issue in the fact that you really can't come back from that.
It feels like Druid from old Hearthstone days a little bit, where if they hit the right chain of events, then it feels like you can't come back.
And with 50 cards, drawing 2, you and a mulligan, you very reliably hit that set of things. So I think the problem is it has a really strong turn that's hard to come back from. It is reliably doing that. And there are some leaders that just either don't have the cards or haven't been explored enough. One of the interesting things is the community's wild right now. I mean, every day I log on, there's new YouTube videos on how to counter Boba Fett, because that's how the community has gone. And you know what's crazy is the deck that's countering Boba Fett right now is Han Green. Han Solo Green, Yellow Green is countering it.
That's kind of thematic, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a Chewbacca blue deck that's running the card Luke Skywalker that everybody said Boba Fett is freaking trash, and that deck came in the Poland tournament in the top 8, and everyone was like, everybody has wrote it, or not Chewbacca. I don't know what I was saying. Was I saying Boba Fett or Chewbacca?
That's okay.
You're talking about the Sentinel Chewbacca.
Yeah, Sentinel Chewbacca. Everybody was saying that Chewbacca as a leader was trash. He was one of the worst leaders. And then he comes in top 8 in the Poland tournament. And people were like, oh, holy crap, Chewbacca Green is actually kind of good.
Well, I have a strong aversion to anyone who labels cards as trash this early in a game. And I've been seeing it a lot actually recently with some streamers for Lorcana, where that came in and they were like, oh, this one card, it's a trash card. Nobody will ever play it. And then meanwhile, a deck played 4 of them and topped an event. And it's like, you don't know what you're talking about until you really spend time with it, and until there's enough data to support it, and until you've actually bothered to create decks and try to make it work and learn why it's good or not good. But people will often be so quick to, for content, right, to judge whether something's good or bad, and then they end up looking like fools. And so you will very rarely hear me when, like, first getting my first look at a card, say, yeah, this is trash, no one will ever play it. It's happened. But for the most part, you're going to hear people like ourselves go, well, maybe in this situation it could work. Maybe in the future set, if we see more support for this kind of mechanic, and that's how to make but that doesn't sell tickets, that doesn't get views and likes. So here's my boomer rant. So,
to be fair, a lot of these people who reviewed them are people who were reviewing them as it was coming out, who had been playing the cards for months on Tabletop Simulator and had been grinding lots and lots and lots of games. Now, the truth is like in a meta tournament, sometimes things come out that are good because everybody showed up to that Poland tournament with Sabine thinking it was going to wreck. And someone was like, oh, this Chewbacca green deck throws a lot of Sentinels out and can beat Sabine, and got in the top 8. But that being said, the other deck that was really interesting to me from this is there's an Emperor Palpatine with Cunning, with yellow. Yeah. And it's super late game. It is the greediest of greedies, but this deck made it in the top 11. And basically it read the field and said, hey, I have a pretty decent matchup against Boba Fett. Boba Fett's going to crush every Sabine deck. And I am going to crush all of the Vader decks that are trying to counter the Boba decks, because Boba beats Vader, Vader beats Boba, Boba beats Sabine, Sabine beats Vader, and the Palpatine deck came in and said, I'm going to have a 0% chance winning against aggro, but I have a really good chance of winning against Vader and a pretty good chance of winning against Boba Fett. And they read the terrain. And now, like, I went to my local game shop and we played some casual games after the draft this past weekend, and the deck that I played against was the shop owner was running Emperor Palpatine with yellow, and I got crushed 2 out of 3 games with it. So I think that the community really is evolving. They're trying new things. You even see people trying to run Grand Inquisitor, which I think is one of those cards that, like, it gets good later. Like, I sat down, I've built all the meta decks at this point. I got the cards. I'm really into the game. And I was sitting down and messing around with a Hera discard deck, because Hera has this unique ability to run off Keller force users. Right. You can use force throw to make people discard cards. She also gets access to For the Rebellion, and if you run her with red, also force surrender. And so you get all of the discard cards you can put in one Hera deck and just manipulate your opponent by discarding their cards before they ever hit the board. I don't even know if it's good, but it's fun. Like, it's super fun. And I think we're seeing that. Like, there's a Chirrut deck that's going out around right now. It's Chirrut Red. It's like, hey, you can flip Chirrut early. He doesn't die the turn he comes out. You can force throw a whole bunch of cards out of your opponent's hand and wreck their board in one turn and flip the game. That deck hasn't been really discovered yet. So I think that ultimately it's twofold. Boba is too strong. Energy Conversion Lab is too strong. Those things are true. I think those are mistakes by the developer. That being said, I think that the community is beginning to explore decks that legitimately counter that Boba green deck. And I think that has been really fun as an observer to watch. And I'm really excited to see what the next big tournament results are, because I think you are going to see some people who are like, I found a deck that actually crushes Boba Fett, and my Thrawn deck took me to top 3, right? Like, I think that's going to happen in the next tournament.
Well, and again, I agree. I also think that that's going to happen. But I also will say this too. That's why people shouldn't label cards as trash, because then they're the ones with an egg on their face when their, blinged out Boba Fett deck gets stomped by, I don't know, Cassian, and somebody breaks Cassian. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I think that, and it's okay to do it in jest, but especially if you're an influencer in the scene, and it really rubs me the wrong way when people, this is a side topic, but when people, are overly zealous about reviewing cards and spreading misinformation about whether a card is good or not without them actually being an expert. So let it be known. Don't do
Well,
that, or I'll
let's.
get you.
He'll get you.
So let it be
We'll send
written.
him after you, and
So
then we'll
let
get
it
an
be done.
AI Ian to get you too.
That's right.
Yeah. So Ralph,
Mm.
let me ask you this, and we'll go around the horn with this one real
Okay.
quick too. Do you think they have a good enough base to build on? Do you think it's going to last? A, B. What do you hope? Like, if you saw this in set 2 gets announced for set 2, that you would get excited for it.
Um, uh, y- yes, I think they absolutely have a great base. I have loved the games that I lost to Ian. Um, I beat him a couple of times, but
You did.
I
You
did.
did.
But I mean, I've loved playing that, and so I absolutely think, and I think there's so much lore and television and movies and minor characters and other facets of I mean an uncommon Vader with a 5 drop that is almost as powerful as the 7. Those kinds of things can help fill that out, still make it feel cool to play if I can't, if the prices don't come down enough. So I absolutely think that they have the base to build on. I have said before what I'd like to see. I would like to see the space lane be more thematic and interesting and fun. Said that
Yep.
already. I also, would. I think I kind of alluded to this earlier. The bad guys have the cool visual things, but the good guys, especially the Force users, have Jedi mind tricks. I would
Yeah.
not mind seeing them lean into that, so you can, maybe direct where somebody attacks or doesn't attack for a turn, or maybe you can borrow a small, the guard or the stormtrooper, borrow them for a turn, or
Yep.
something to that effect, and lean into those kind of cool things that maybe aren't so maybe don't make the best artwork in the world, but that's not what they do anyway. So, I mean, I would, I would like to see those. And the other thing that I wouldn't mind seeing in a much later set, unless we get into a confusing thing where a lot of little kids are playing, and because I remember like when Batman and Superman fought in one of the movies, and they'll think, hey, they're supposed to be good guys and they're fighting it, but I would love to see at some point a version of Lorcana's Floodborn characters, almost like a what if kind of set, where at key points where maybe Anakin didn't turn to the dark side and there was no Vader, or perhaps Luke did in Return of the Jedi. I think he tapped into the dark side a little bit. What if Luke was the evil thing, or those kinds of things? What if Jar
That could be
Jar
really
was
fun
cool?
in like 5 years
Yeah.
as like a alt set.
Yeah,
that'd be neat.
exactly. Just so
Yeah.
and so you could then splash evil Luke into a villain deck, and I mean that would be a much later set. I am kind of concerned about, for me, theme matters so much to me with Star Wars. When they start getting into some of the shows I didn't really care about, or maybe I wasn't a big fan of the last trilogy. I don't know. Kylo Ren was pretty cool in the first movie he was in, but after that, I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to feel about that when we start getting into that theme. But hey, some people love those movies and they'll love that thing, and then I'll lean back on mechanics, which I don't think they're inventing anything new, with the exception of the hero coming in. Is to me still the coolest part of the game, when the hero pops in there and makes a cameo into that ground lane, and hopefully later on the space lane, and kicks some butt and then goes back to affecting things behind the scenes. I like that. So, big essay question. The bottom line is yes, I think they have a base to build on.
Okay,
So.
awesome. Ian, how about you? Do you think they have a good base to build on here with set 1? And what is something that you would want to see in set 2?
Yeah, I definitely think they have a base. Ironically, I guess I'd feel more confident if I knew that this had Disney money being thrown at it. And I'm pretty sure that Lorcana has Disney money being thrown at it. But because Fantasy Flight has had the Star Wars property for so long, I worry that maybe it doesn't, right? And that maybe this is a like Disney doesn't necessarily care if Star Wars, this iteration of Star Wars game, lives or dies. I would feel better knowing that, frankly, because at the end of the day, it's, are you willing to weather the storm? Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point, they've all been through their ups and downs, and
Sure.
I think more so than anything else, you need the commitment to the game to weather the storm. Something that we've seen, games go until they're completely, bled dry. Games like Gwent, which just tried until the very bitter end to keep going, hey, I don't mind that they fail. But then you see games like Runeterra where they just kind of felt like they never really had the backing, and then they never really found a way to be profitable, and then they never really tried to fix that. Right. And those are digital games, so it's not the same, but that's something I'll throw out there. I do think from a Bones perspective, I think that the game definitely has the mechanical legs to attract serious players. I do worry that unlike something like Lorcana or Pokemon, or even, I hate to say, Magic just has such a history behind it that I've seen people get into it if for no other reason than, hey, my dad plays. The kids just go, my dad plays, so I want to play Magic, right? And that sometimes is enough to continue fueling generations of gamers, right?
Absolutely.
I worry about that with Star Wars because while we as gamers got into the game pretty fast because we could pick up the rules, the game is punishing. If you screw up, you're in trouble.
Oh yeah,
that is true. Yeah, that is definitely true.
I mean,
And
you
so-
handed me my butt on a couple of games simply because of timing issues, and I'm an experienced player. And you had, and you gave a lightsaber to C-3PO.
Yeah, and then I said, well, now C-3PO wins.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just worry about that
Yeah.
from that perspective. Will kids stick with it when they're getting crushed? One thing I've realized is sneaky smart about Pokemon is when you're getting crushed, it still goes a few more turns. Like, it doesn't always feel like you're getting crushed right away, Same with Lorcana. I think Lorcana does a great job of that. So I worry about that. I do think this game is going to be perfect for siphoning off Magic players. Because I think that it is an appropriate level of depth without complication. Like, it's deep, but it's not as fiddly as Magic. It's certainly more consistent. You're not going to have mana flooding or mana drought issues in this game, and it's going to and it will end up being cheaper than Magic inevitably. So that's optimistic. So I think yes, but unlike Lorcana, I'm just not as I'm I think it'll be fine. Do I think it will make it 10 years? I just don't know yet. I just don't know yet. And I think if it makes 10 years, then you're golden, right? Because every game that's made it 10 years has gone another 10 or is still going. You know what I mean? I mean, it took 20 years for old Legend of the Five Rings to die out, and then they still got a reboot, right? So, so I'm optimistic, but not as all in as I am with Lorcan in terms of my belief it'll be here in 10 years. But that being said, in terms of to answer the second part of your question, what do I hope that they will do? I have a big problem with the game that I didn't really realize I had until recently, because it had never come up in a game until I'm watching a game and it happened. I hate that you can have a unique leader and a unique character of the same name out at the same time.
Can you?
You
can, as long as their sub name is different. So the leader and the card can come out. You can have two Boba Fetts or two Vaders.
Didn't know that.
I despise it. And weirdly, so I would love to, I think from a flavor perspective, it completely erodes it. So I don't mind you being able to run it in your deck, but if you have a Boba Fett, a baby Fett, we'll call it, out, and then you leader your leader in, you should have to get rid of your baby Fett.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I ran into that issue, myself, just sort of playing the starter decks with Lindsay the other day, and so it was I was like, wait, what would happen if I had Luke here and the leader Luke? And I don't have a Luke, but I went and looked it up, and I'm like, oh wait, you can do that?
Yeah, you can play them both.
And I think that I don't know. Maybe I'm overreacting. I just really despise that.
Yeah, I didn't.
It doesn't make
I
sense.
just assumed that you couldn't do that. And I'm disappointed to hear that. I mean, if nothing else, even if you don't pitch the other Luke, maybe you exhaust it or get it out of the way or stack
I just
on
think that
top
if
of
it's
it. But
if uniqueness is a thing in the game, they should actually
I
enforce it
agree. I
consistently.
agree.
But anyways, whatever. That's a minor gripe. That really is a minor gripe that most people won't care about, but I care.
I don't
Yeah.
like. I mean, I have a problem with Lorcana. You can have 59 Zeus's
Mickey
out,
Mouse.
and it's like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I actually think with Lorcana, weirdly it works because there's this multiverse theory thing going on.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean? Like that's the whole point of Lorcana is basically a multiverse,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So I don't have an issue with it with Lorcana, but I hear you.
Yeah,
Anyways, I think that I think that if they iron out sort of the making sure the product's available, make it so that the cards are decently priced, then I think that this is a game that's going to stick around for 2 to 3 years
that seems to be what
minimum.
they do.
Minimum.
Minimum.
Yeah.
And so at least for that long, I will be following along because I think it's an interesting game.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things for me from the economic standpoint that makes me think this game will be around for a while. One, I mentioned this before, it's the biggest team that FFG's ever assigned to it.
It's a good sign.
Two, they've promised releases through 2028, 2029. It's like 4 years. So 2028, I guess, something like that. They are working on polishing. They're like working through up into set 9 right now. So like FFG's put some stuff behind it. They've also come out and publicly said this is the best selling game that the studio of FFG in general has ever released. It is the number one seller of all time for their studio. So they're receiving the financial, it's coming back to them. So they feel good about that. The next thing is they have a good team on it of people who've made a lot of card games. That's good. And then, last week we made the announcement that they were out of stock, and then FFG came out and like, hey, we're not out of stock. We released at the beginning of March. We thought that we would have to move our phase 2 of set 1 out of our warehouses at the end of March. Turns out it all got bought up in the first 10 days. We are going to begin releasing stock in measured waves from now till set 2. We had a contingencies plan in place if the first round got bought up. Like they're saying, hey, we're working with people who are making more product. We have product. We were prepared for this, but we actually were not prepared for how wildly popular this would be. We thought this is where we would be 4 weeks in, and instead this is where we are 2 weeks in. And so we're taking action. You're going to be able to get product. And it did take boxes that spiked to 150 down to like 120. And it took Vaders who were spiked to 110 down to 70. Still too expensive. My point is that they were at least pseudo prepared for their product to be popular. And it even outstripped what they predicted. I think that speaks good things. I think that the base of the game is strong. My number one concern is how strong Boba Fett that deck is right now. Only because it has this unique thing where it can ready so many resources and it flips on a turn. And I've seen in-card games before when it's not just that the deck is good because you piloted it well. It's just good because if you got the right 3-drop and the right 5-drop, that you win. And I think that element of this deck is because it isn't that it just has the best stuff or it's the most flexible. It is that it has the most busted turn 3 turn.
Sure.
And it's pretty easy to pull off. And so I think that's the only thing that has me concerned. If I look to the future, here's what I want to see in set 2.
Always in motion, the future.
It is. So I would love to see a clear definition or direction for villain decks to become aggressive and for heroism decks to become control. Because right now, that doesn't really exist. Heroism is kind of like the scrappy underdog. So they're aggressive, they're rebels. It's cool, it's thematic, but they don't have a really good sort of like Jedi feeling control deck that I really want, specifically Vigilance inside of Heroism to have. And I really want to see the Maul or the whatever like sit back and control Imperial, but sort of like the Ventress assassin, like the rogue out there on her own, or the Mandalorian, evil Mandalorian death squad, right? Like coming in, and I want to see that, like the sort of aggressive, crazy side of the villain in the dark side, not just like the controlled, mitigated sort of like Thrawn, Vader, Emperor Palpatine, Tarkin, all of them that we got, at least in this initial set, with the exception of Inquisitor, which isn't good yet,
And
have largely
IG-88.
been, and IG-88, which is bad as well. We just haven't gotten the tools for aggressive and sort of chaotic dark side, and I really want to see that in the game. And so for me, those are the two type of decks and I just said deck archetypes
That's a different kind
that
of
I would
game,
love to see.
That's right.
Yeah, that's not what I want to see in this game.
Dang,
So-
we have to mark this episode as explicit now. Thanks,
And
Mark.
I do have to. Yes, you're not wrong. Sorry, kids.
Wait, so now I can say anything I want because it's explicit?
No. So we got to give our final vote
Butts.
because we've been at this as a while. We got to give our final vote. Is this a game that you think you'll keep busting out and playing in some capacity, whether that be Twin Suns, games with friends? I'll go pick up the next 2-player starter set when it comes out and check it out, or I'm going to be all in and buy a ton of stuff. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Ralph, you're first.
Thumbs up. I am interested in this game. It's a thumbs up, but not real super high because I don't have a game shop near me. I am not really eager to spend tons of money on cracking packs, which I don't think is as necessary as it used to be since we have the singles market. Also, too, it really depends a lot on what my son wants to do, frankly. He is actually playing actively, and so when we get together, on holidays and weekends, and when we get the chance to visit as often as we can, cards and board games break out, and inevitably it seems to be a lot of Lorcana or testing Pokemon. And now I imagine we'll be throwing in a Star Wars game or two. But if the force is not with Ian and he chooses, that I'm really going to concentrate on, Pokemon competitively and developing Lorcana, then, that singles market for me will probably end up being more picking up those things. And I mean, Ian cracks a lot of packs, and so he throws me a lot of uncommons and the rares that he's not using for Lorcana, and helps me out with Pokemon as I'm going through that. Oh, this is cool. And of course, I'm a good deck builder, but Ian's right into the meta, so he's the better deck builder of us right now. And
I mean, I'm just copying what I see places for.
Well,
As far as Star Wars goes,
No. See, the thing is that we can take, for Star Wars, sure, but that we can look at our card pool and put together something that's halfway decent. It's not going to win a major tournament, but it'd be fun to play. Like I've got a Pete deck right now that's a ton of fun for Lorcana.
Yeah,
but so I am interested in it, and I will continue to follow it, and I will pick up some singles, and I will, pick up starter deck and that kind of thing. But am I going to get completely into it where I'm shelling out lots of bucks? Maybe, but probably not. I looked up the number one, I guess the highest rated on Board Game Geek Star Wars product is Rebellion. Which is a miniatures game if you're into that. And of course they have expansions and other miniatures that you can buy, etc. You can get into that for $80. So you can play if you just really want to play Star Wars and you have a big table.
It's a lot of options for playing Star Wars.
And a card game that has a bunch of things where you end up with a bunch of binder fodder, whatever, and you're spending a bunch of money. You have to go, is this worth my time? But I'm a sucker for opening packs and options. And every 3 or 4 months, new options come and it changes it. I absolutely love that. So quick answer, yes, I will continue to be interested in it, but I will not be dropping major coin on it anytime soon.
Okay, awesome. Ian, how about you? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Yeah, thumbs up. I mean, that's probably to be expected by people at this stage. I similarly have some reservations about like how long will it really last, right?
Hmm.
Like I believe it'll last at minimum 3 years, right? But how long will it really last, right? Because of the FFG history I have, I just have a hard time feeling like I can go all in on it. But the good news is, right now where I'm at, I probably wouldn't have gone all in on it anyways, and elected to sort of follow it as a fun side, adventure to my larger, collectible trading card game hobby, which is focused, from a competitive standpoint, probably closer, more on Pokemon when to sort of really try to test myself from a competitive side and from a creative side on Lorcana and a community side, especially on Lorcana, where I'm, running the store league, right? And that's where most of my time and focus are going to be. I think it's also, I'm at a place where I weird similar but different to Dad. I mean, I also want to play games that other people are interested in playing with, and my girlfriend really likes Lorcana.
Hmm.
Well, boy howdy, I want to support that as much as possible, right? Gibby is deep in
Yes,
Lorcana.
he is.
Well, great. So, I mean, that's the easiest thing for me to sort of get behind. And then Curry is in Pokemon, and I have this local Pokemon community, which is really, really great. Like, just, really great people that have been really nice and are super supportive. So, I'm realizing card games are becoming a community thing for me
Hmm.
more than it's transcending just a mental exercise of a hobby and becoming what I think it was for my when I was in high school, which was a community thing too, where I was on message boards messaging with the people at the shop an hour away in between, monthly tournaments, right? Um, and now, of course, having my own store that I can go to and play in again after the whole pandemic of 3 or 4 years where we just stopped playing games in person outside of me and Dad, right? So um the community is so much bigger of a side than I thought it was, and right now my main shop isn't running a Star Wars night and isn't likely to start one. I say this because I know the owner.
Sure.
um, there are stores that have Star Wars nights. I don't know how much I have time to go to those. So there may be a time when I check it out. And I thought I wasn't going to keep with Pokemon, and now I'm knee deep in Pokemon cards. So this is all,
You
this is
know,
all
who
possible to
knows?
change.
He's not exaggerating too much.
I have a
There's a
big
lot of
old bin I
Pokemon
just
cards.
recently sorted. So that's a lot of bulk cards in Pokemon. But anyways, I just say, like, just because I feel this way now doesn't mean I'll always feel this way, both either good or bad.
Yeah.
But for now, it gets a thumbs up, and at minimum, I'm going to be buying a box of cards whenever a new set comes out, so that Dad and I can pop them open and build some, sealed decks.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think for me, it's pretty obviously a thumbs up, right? Like I have bought a lot of cards. I'm super interested in the game. I've been really enjoying playing it. And, to a certain extent, it has been a community thing for me too.
yeah,
Many people know that outside of podcasting, I lead an online church, and we have about 800 or so people who are in our Discord server, and we game together, hang out together. We've never had a card game that we've actually, people have tried to get us into Magic the Gathering and things in Commander, and it's never really worked. But I've been playing every week with members of our community. We've been playing every week webcam games. I've gone to a local game shop. I played, came in second in a draft there this past weekend. Unfortunately, they have stuff the same night that my community has stuff Wednesday nights, but they have 2 game nights a week for Star Wars. So they also
Nice.
have a Wednesday and a Saturday, and they
wow,
alternate between drafts and constructed. Um, and they're going to be starting to do a constructed night followed by a Twin Suns night, for casual play and fun. And that is super exciting to me. And not only that, but like 2 people from my online community who are playing Star Wars with me live around Pittsburgh. And the feisty goblin is sort of in between all of us. And so 3 of us, people I never get together with physically, got together physically to draft this past weekend on Saturday. And that was really special for me, right? We had 13 people in the draft, but I knew 2 of them well from just online connection. And I got to meet some people and sit in the shop and play. And my daughter wants to go and see the shop now. And it has tons of board games, really good ones, an enormous amount. They have a ton of Pokemon cards. They have a decent chunk of Lorcana, a lot of Magic. So they have a lot of stuff to get into there. And I think that's exciting. And so for me, in a very similar way to you, DBN, as to why Star Wars gets a thumbs up, but may not be something you continue to play or invest in, is the very reason it might get that from me, is because I'm finding a community around it. And I have not found that around a card game in a really, really long time. And hey, it got me to buy more cards, and more power to them, right? Got me to go to a local shop and, sit across from some people and play some games. And they're a couple, there for the evening. I was the last one out of the shop. It was like, people were like, hey, you want to play some random games? Like, yeah, let's play. Like, I haven't done this in so long. I played with one of the shop owners.
I just want to say, like, I am genuinely so happy for you.
Yeah, me too.
Because I did not know how much I needed that.
I miss it
in my life.
It's great.
I miss it. We had a group that it was small, but it was you could always count on them. Every Thursday night, we would go and play new 5R, old 5R, and then new 5R. And then the lockdowns hit. You guys may have heard of that.
And the game got
canceled.
The game
got canceled, and
in the middle. 8 months into COVID, and they're like, "Yep, we're done. We're tapping out."
And and then now where I live, there's nothing around, and it's a little awkward for some old guy go walking in. Hey, it's where you play this Pokemon game. They're gonna look at me sideways, going, "Who's this guy?" If
you'd be
if
surprised.
I had the
there's
ambassador,
actually
Ian or Gibby to go with me, could maybe form more community. But the closest one to me is like 45 minutes away. So. Yeah.
Can I just throw something else out there as we wrap up this segment here in this episode?
Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
I think that this would be a bigger thumbs up if it didn't catch me at this stage of my life where I'm at now. If this had come out this time a year ago, I would be all in on it. All in. Going to events, traveling. I probably wouldn't have picked up Pokemon, right? And maybe this is something to be concerned about for, I kind of raised this question earlier, like there's a lot of games competing for people's attention, right? But I will say that, like, as an endorsement, even though I just said I don't know how much I'll stick with this game, that is partly because of the whole sunk cost, dilemma, right? In terms of the other games. It's not that this game is worse or not as interesting to me as Lorcana or Pokemon, right? But it's rather that I've invested not just financially, because that's probably the least important thing. I'm a little reckless. This is my number one hobby. I don't golf, okay? I just play card games, right? I don't even really pay for video games. I just play free games, right? But I've invested not just financially, right? But emotionally, I've learned the meta games. I've spent time. I've built connections and friendships and relationships. So if this had caught me at a different time in my life, I probably would be like all in, because the game is good, right? It is fun. It is engaging. And I want to throw one more recommendation out just to show you that I'm serious. For those of you listening, who followed us in the Runeterra days, maybe you just listen to the podcast still just to keep up with whatever we're up to. We do get occasional people. We've actually weirdly got a few OGs coming back in to the server and checking things out again. I just want to say to those people, look, if you're not currently playing a card game and you're looking for that thing to follow up Runeterra, or, even if you're a Tessel old head, right? This is probably the best game of the available options right now. And I say that even knowing that I'm recommending it over something like Pokemon or, Lorcana, because it really appeals to people that are already gamers. It's new, so you can get in on the ground floor, right? It's Star Wars, which is a recognizable and popular IP. So when you talk to people about it, they won't get confused, right? And ultimately, although it is not as cheap as Pokemon, it is still likely going to end up being about the same cost to play, Lorcana competitively. They're probably going to be about the same. And especially, I think that they're still going to be a lot cheaper than sort of the old school games,
Yeah.
barring Pokemon, the Magic and the Yu-Gi-Oh!
One
And the
Piece,
One Piece and Digimon, all of those, which are, inordinately more expensive.
Mhm.
So
even Flesh and Blood, even
Flesh and Blood for
yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those games at a competitive level,
Yeah,
very, very
yeah.
expensive. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, hey, that was a glowing review, guys, and a great set of episodes. Next week, we're going to be back, and we're going to be joined together with Gibby. Gibby's going to be back next time.
Yeah.
So me, Ian, and Gibby will be back, and we're going to be checking out a new digital card game that came out pretty recently. And I think it has a physical game too. I'm not 100% sure. We're going to do research before next week, so I don't just say things out of my rear end that are completely
Okay.
inaccurate. But we're going to be playing the new Dragon Ball Z card game, which looks pretty interesting. I think you kind of take control of a character and build a deck around them, and then get your power up to 9,000. And or over some
Over 9,000
over
even. Wow.
9,000 even. I think you might be able to do. And so pretty pumped about that. We're going to be checking out that next week. So we're going to be dabbling in it and talking about that for throughout April.
Yes.
And so be sure to check out those episodes.
And
moving on.
Yeah. Just before we go, Dad,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us. It's been really special for me to get to share this with you. So thank you.
Same here. Thank you very much. I mean, letting me go on and on and rant about things. And
hey, that's what I do here. So it runs in the family.
It does, but it was, I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying this. Been an honor to be able to sit in with you guys because secretly it's something that I was hoping I could do someday. So don't tell anybody, but I do.
Well,
really
glad we've checked that off your
it.
bucket list.
Yeah, it's gone now, so it's okay. I could get hit by a bus now. I'm happy.
Oh, please no.
Well, Ralph, it was great to have your insight on the show, and it was a ton of fun to have you here. And it doesn't hurt to have a voice actor who subs in on the show when one of us is over making YouTube videos. Speaking of, go watch YouTube videos and specifically watch ours. And you can grab the link to that in the description of this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening. And like always, be sure to come back for next episode. Hey. Welcome back to the booster pack. I remembered.
Ooh, you remembered. It's so juicy.
It is juicy. Yes, welcome back to the booster pack where we talk about things that we didn't talk about in the last hour and a half that you listened to us talk.
Yeah, a little less grounded, in the game that we're covering.
Which we struggle with to begin with. Let's just be entirely honest. The grounded thing, it's never been... I have been saying since we launched the show in like 2019, hey, we just need to keep this thing to like 45 minutes. And unless we hated the game that we were playing, I don't think it's ever happened.
We did keep them pretty tight when we were covering Warp Forge.
Yeah.
Those were shorter. Yeah, I noticed
those were short.
Yeah.
We're like, I booted up the game this week to say that I did, and I didn't play a game. Let's move on.
Well, just wait till you get Dead Broke Bot online. Then we'll be right on the money.
I'm training the AI, man. He's training on all the old episodes right now.
Yeah.
Okay, Ian, you have something for us today. You had a conversation topic you wanted to bring up for post-show banter.
That's right. Yes. So it was something that actually struck me in the last couple of days because I obviously consume content for multiple games, right? I watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts for Pokemon and Lorcana and now Star Wars and, whatever. And something that I have realized and even recognized a little bit myself, but something that really struck me is that I will often hear content creators, and this is nothing new, be pretty dismissive of other card games in there, that are out there. But I've felt and heard sort of a surge of almost, it feels like a counter wave of existing influencers within the scene of card games, almost whether actively or passively sort of undermining these new wave of card games that have been coming out, post pandemic. So we've got these established card games that have existed for a long time now, specifically this, kind of big three, if you will, right? Of Pokemon, Magic, and Yu-Gi-Oh!
Mm-hmm.
And then we have so many deeply at this point entrenched content creators for these, professional players or YouTubers that have been doing this for a long time. And I think that it makes sense in many ways that they would sort of feel threatened by new games. And you and I, Mark, both know how tough it is to reinvent your channel or your brand in a new card game, if yours goes under. So I understand that sentiment. That being said, I was listening to a Pokemon podcast the other day, but one that I adore and the host's opinions I really enjoy. And hearing sort of the level of dismissiveness around Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited really rattled me, and it made me think about this, because they basically said, well, there's really no point in any card game that's not in the big three even coming out, because inevitably they'll never survive. And I wanted to get you guys' take on both of these issues. One, this idea, and I realize, man, I constantly am ripping jokes targeted at Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm also on the record as being, and this is more rooted in my experiences with it, but pretty dismissive of Magic's mechanics, right? Now, granted, I'm not tied to any one game, right? But is this harmful? Is this gatekeeping? And then on the flip side, is there a point to it? Like, are we going to fast forward 10 years, and is there a shot at there being anything other than Pokemon and Magic and maybe Yu-Gi-Oh?
Well, I think it is significant that TCG Player is no longer calling it the big three. I think it is significant that they are now calling it the big five. And they have added One Piece and Lorcana in that.
Yeah.
I don't think they do that lightly. And I'll be honest, with the ridiculous success of Star Wars this month, I wouldn't be surprised if some point during set 2, they're saying this is the big 6. It seems like we are in sort of a renaissance right now of card gaming, and physical card gaming specifically, in the fact that all of us remember trying to get our hands on Pokemon cards in the 90s, and none of us had the money. Well, maybe Ralph did. I didn't have the money, right? Ian didn't have the money. And now we have the money. I can spend $150 on 3 Boba Fetts. I can do that. And I'm not losing my house. I'm still able to feed my kids.
Sure.
Right? And I think for a long time, it was sort of like, man, we just didn't have the disposable income. And those of us who did spend it on that stuff were doing so absolutely recklessly. We could not do it responsibly. And now there's a lot of people who can come back to these card games who, quite frankly, are like me, who are saying, listen, I fell out of Magic, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! So many years ago that I don't feel like I want to try to catch up. And so I'm looking at these new card games and I'm like, man, if a physical card game catches my fancy, I'm going to get in on it at the ground level like I wished I could have in 1999 with Pokemon. And I'm going to stick with that game. I'm going to have loyalty to that game because I'm actually able to do it now. And I haven't gotten back into Magic, and I haven't really gotten heavily involved in Pokemon, and I haven't gotten involved in Yu-Gi-Oh! Despite playing all those games in the past, because of I wanted to do that with Lorcana. I couldn't do it with Lorcana. For me, it was I couldn't, because my region of the country, for whatever reason, got no product. And I got frustrated and just backed out because I was like, I wanted to be on the ground level of this game and I couldn't be. And now I feel like I'm behind already. And I feel it wasn't as bad as being behind on Magic the Gathering, but
Sure.
It felt similar to me. Like I have to backtrack. And with Star Wars, I was like, an IP that I love, and I don't have to backtrack. There's actually product. I can get on the ground level of this. I can live the dream of my 1999 sixth grade self, and I can go get the cards that are cool and powerful that I want, and I can play it, and I can follow it and I can get friends into it. And so for that reason, I think that the games like Star Wars, One Piece, and Lorcana are actually getting a different player. I don't actually think they're stealing, which is why I think lifelong Magic players might be wrong. Content creators might be wrong. They're saying, oh, people are just jumping to that temporarily, but they'll leave it. I think what they underestimate is the number of people who left Magic, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh years ago and never went to another card game, who always wish they could and never have. And now they're buying this, right? Like this guy that I've been playing with, Josh, really good dude. He tried to get into Flesh and Blood. He tried to get into that. He bought 2 cases of this game of Star Wars when it came out, and he's like in. And you know what? His buddy who used to, I met him at the game shop, who used to play cards like way back when he was a kid, has never bought in again. And he was always like, it's too expensive. I don't want to get, bought into that buying pack stuff. He's getting into Star Wars and really enjoying it. He's coming to all the events and he's playing, and this is one of Josh's best friends. And so I think that there is actually the reason why there's such a renaissance is because 90s kids who abandoned card games a long time ago, like me, are coming back to it and seeing some new games coming out post pandemic. And they're saying, I kind of want to get into that. I kind of want to go back to a local game shop. I kind of want to do that. So I think that's true. Now, in terms of, talking bad about other games, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think it could be. It could be a bad thing. But, for me, it's kind of like my dad was a Chevy guy and not a Ford guy, or my dad was a Farmall guy and not a John Deere guy. And did that mean that he legitimately hated people who bought John Deere tractors? No, he didn't. They were still people who bought tractors, right? They had that in common. But he would razz, my uncle who liked John Deere.
Yeah.
And I think in a very similar way, it's like, hey, we don't play the same game. You play Pokemon, you play Magic, you play Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever. We're still card gamers, right? I kind of razz you because I think my game's better. You kind of razz me back because you're like, well, your game's going to die before mine, right? And I think that could be negative, and certainly there's an elitist mentality that goes around gaming, especially with people who are socially awkward and can tend to be a little bit backwards and unhealthy. But I think to a certain extent, there's a fun little bit of banter in that, right? Of like, man, there were some people playing Commander while we were doing our draft the other night. I think there's a little fun banter in that of like, what card game is the best card game? And I don't really have a problem with that. Even content creators who are kind of saying like, hey, this game's going to be a flash in the pan. I think if it's in good fun and it's a jest, that's one thing. If it's malicious and like you're belittling people or hating people because they like something you don't like, that's stupid, of course.
Sure.
But if it can be jabbed at in good fun, like we might jab at a game here and there, I think it's okay.
I think I agree. Obviously, when you're seeing in person, like, yeah, I razz Yu-Gi-Oh all the time because it's fun to razz Yu-Gi-Oh. Of course, there's nothing personal towards, the people play it, although I happen to think that the game's not very good, but that's a separate issue, right? I do think that we live in a sort of a misinformation and a social media, go with the flow and with what everybody says thing. And I worry about the impact that the might of the player base of Magic and Pokemon might have. You look no further than the comment section on the Is Lorcana Too Expensive video, right? Because you will see almost 100 comments. By the way, our top performing YouTube video, almost 100 comments of Lorcana players going, yeah, it is a little pricey. And everyone else from Magic and One Piece and Flesh and Blood going, you idiot Lorcana players, you've got it good. You don't know what it's like to be in this game, and really laying into, or why would anybody want to play a Mickey Mouse game? I mean, there's just a lot of, and so my concern is not actually that any one conversation is going to matter, but what can the might of a radicalized existing fan base for Magic or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh do? What damage can that do to these up and coming card games?
Yeah. Well, Ralph, how about you? What do you think?
Well, as a player who tends to drift toward games that nobody else wants to play, I've got a pretty tough hide about this. My favorite game, and in my opinion, the best CCG ever, was
Uh-huh.
canceled, what, 10 years ago? And that was Versus
Yeah.
System number
Yep.
one.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, Star Wars, Lorcana, Pokemon, Magic, they all suck compared to Versus. Hey, come at me, but it's okay. We have a dead card game now,
Yeah.
Magic continues, Pokemon continues. I mean, they're all good games. I just love that particular one. And my next two favorites are both called L5R, and they're both canceled.
Right.
But did that make them bad games? No. Did it make it a challenge to go in and tell your gaming store, you said we were going to have a table. I don't care that we have an event for this new fluffy Japanese anime game.
Oh, yeah, this is a real story, by the way.
Yeah, these were reserved for us, and we drop how much here? Give us our tables, right?
Yeah.
And okay, but so that was tough, but we enjoyed our game. We enjoyed our community. I do tend to agree that that there is a renaissance in this type of game. I keep harping on the economics of it because, CCGs have always been famous for costing a lot of money to continue to play, particularly if you want to play competitively. And yet, not only do we have, our big three, but as you said, it's expanding. Lorcana's doing great. A Pokemon even seems to have even better, interest in it coming along. And then now we've got Star Wars that's dropping. And really, honestly, economically, it's a horrible time for them to be dropping. And yet the sales are going through the roof. Are we pulling from Magic players? Maybe they'll play both games. Somehow or other, they're going to be splitting their money. But I got to say that overall, my biggest thanks go to Lorcana, because they are the ones that are bringing in a fresh group of players. They're the ones that have young ladies interested in playing the game. Magic players, the ladies are over playing Lorcana if you're interested. Okay.
It's so true, actually.
Of all ages. And the kids are coming in and moms are bringing people, whatever.
That's the thing. The moms are trying the game. That blows my freaking mind.
Right. And not only that, but it's also encouraging someone like my son and other people that are probably at the Feisty Goblin, whatever. It's encouraging those people that are really good ambassadors toward the overall, a hobby of card gaming. It's not just, sweaty guys like me sticking around going, hey, come on, let's shuffle up again. It's not that. I mean, it's just not that anymore. It's families, it's cafes opening up where you can get a decent sandwich and a cup of coffee and maybe a craft beer, and it's opening up, and it's not necessarily just, hey, drop a bunch of money on this. It's also cracking open an 18 card game, from Button Shy Games and playing it on the tabletop, there, and everybody enjoy, hey, what are you playing? So I get the fact that content creators, they have to say something. They have to have a clickbait up there to get the numbers in. And there is a certain amount of saying, hey, I play Magic and we're the number one game. And I got to tell you, I'm looking at some of the artwork. The Magic artwork has consistently been amazing. And I saw the thing, with the Jeff Goldblum, I guess it was the promo card for, as they're getting into these alternate
this is a
worlds.
whole different discussion we can't get into, but they're doing all these multiverse things.
Yeah. And it's like, man, I mean, if anything would draw me back into playing, Magic, because I played it early on. And my issue with Magic was I couldn't get, the demons were like really demonic. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just not comfortable with this. And then the players at that time anyway, weren't much better. So, I got really turned off by the community and also didn't like, I hated the mana burn idea. So, so other games that didn't do that, were more attractive to me. But, hey, they got to say what they got to say. We can take it. I hopefully that, they would try some of these things out, because there is a limited amount of money to go into card gaming and, or gaming in general. And if I choose to buy Lorcana cards or Pokemon cards and not Yu-Gi-Oh or One Piece or whatever, hey, we're all trying to get people interested in our hobby. So I'd much rather be an ambassador than a hater, for my 2 cents.
Fair enough.
So, yeah. Well, that's a great discussion topic.
Yeah, it really was. Thanks, Ian.
That was great.
Well, thank you.
Great. And also, if you're out there,
I'm all mad because my favorite games got canceled. Because
I know, right? R.I.P. versus.
I'm gonna go crack open and look at my old Fantastic Four deck now.
No, I'm gonna go buy some Pokemon packs and let the dopamine put me to sleep.
Also, if you're out there and you're playing one of these old games and you're hating on people who are enjoying a new game, thank you for your comments because it boosts the algorithm.
That's
and,
right. That was the best part about it.
Also, just learn to act right. Just learn, come on,
just
man.
Chill, bro.
Like just learn to act right, bro.
And I don't have it up right now, but on one of the videos that we did, one of our first episode, somebody commented that bring back the resource row that you could be interactive and the formation step
of versus. We did get a guy commenting about versus system, like, yeah, that was my game, bro. One person, but we got them. They know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Let's
go. He probably subbed. Let's
That's
be real.
A subscriber right there.
Yeah, he probably subbed.
Man, thank you so much. I still have decks.
Right.
We can play.
Oh, anytime, baby. I've got a whole box of them.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's going to do it for this episode.
Thanks.
It was a fun one, and Ralph, it's been a joy to have you on the show. It was a ton of fun talking about Star Wars. It's probably the most fun I've had doing the show in a really long time because it's a game that I'm so heavily invested in right now, and so that's dope. But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening and tuning in, and as always, we'll see you back in the next one.